And now we're on Daf Tesamid Beis. Chol Ashtaras Ha'olim Barchosh Ovdei Kochavim Afal Pisha Chosmeim Ovdei Kochavim Ksherim Chutz Migitei Noshim V'Shekurei Avodim. So let's say, for example, if you have a star mammon and it comes out of a non-Jewish court, a secular court, and it has a star with a signature of non-Jews. The star is kosher. Why? Excuse me. Because Bnei Noach are commanded amongst the 7 mitzvahs on dinim. They have to set up courts to judge and to adjudicate. And in dinim momenos, they are very makpid on the laws of mammon. This is the Ramban in his Pirush al Torah in Breshis Lamed Dalet. So therefore, we're going to apply the principle that we rely on the veracity of the shtar, and we can force a Jew to pay money based on the shtar. Furthermore, as the Even Elzel points out in Hilchos Malvulova Perkov Zion, there's a principle called Dina Malchusa Dina. So therefore, the shtar coming out of Erchos Shel Akum is valid and binding. And that means that even if the person who gave the shtar or received the shtar, they're all Jews, it's binding. But in the cases of Gittin Noshim Shechurei Avodim that were issued by the non-Jewish court, these are psulim. And as Rashi points out here, we have a pasuk in the parsha of Get that's in Kitetze. It says v'kosav l'sefer kris v'nosan biyada, and there's a hekesh in the pasuk between the writing of the get and the giving of the get for kosav v'nosan, and that teaches me that who's ever shayach to nesinas aget is kosher for ksivas aget, but a guy is not shayach to nesinas aget, and therefore he's not kosher to ksivas aget. Now, Tosas points out that we could have, and Rashi should have mentioned even something more basic, and that is edus. A guy is not a bar edus. And Rashi doesn't mention that a guy is possibly edus. It sounds like if you know that if you have reason to believe that the guy is telling the truth, then we can rely on him as if he was a kosher aid. But in any event, one thing is clear, that there's no possibility of a guy writing a get, just like there's no possibility of a guy transmitting the get. And this is based on a principle that you need a bar ishus in order to deliver a get to a woman. And by virtue of this hekesh, you need a bar gerushin, or a bar ishus, we should say, in order to write a get. Because of a nosan. So a guy is not shaykh to nesinas aget, and therefore he's not kosher to the ksivas aget. Now we have a hekesh between a get shichur and a get isha. That's called the gzar yeshav of la. And that's a sugya later on in Daf Lamed Tes Amid Beis. And therefore, kol advarim aposlim b'deraisa beget psulim aposlim gam ke b'shtar shichur. So now we have 3 equations. Now, in Divrei Rabbi Meir B'Arba, Rabbi Meir is going to add a 4th analogy or commonality between Get Isha and Shtar Shichur. And what is that? This is based on the Mishnah Rabbi Meir later on in Daf Yud Aleph Amid Beis. Ha'omer tein get zel ishti. A man says to his shliach, give this get to my wife, or an adon says to shliach, give this shtar shichur li avdi. Rotza lachzo b'shneim yachzo divrei Meir. A man could be choser bo and retract his original agreement that the shliach should bring the get, and this applies both to gerushin and to a shtar shichur, as long as the shliach has not yet delivered the get to the receiving party. In other words, the shliach cannot apply the principle of zoch the adam shlo b'fanav to be zoch in the get on behalf of the isha immediately when the get comes into his hand, or zoch the adam shlo b'fanav into the hands of the eved. Divrei Rabbi Meir. So Rabbi Meir is of the opinion that it's a chov for a woman to be divorced, and it's a chov for an eved to go lecherus, and ein chov li adam shlo b'fanav. and therefore the shliach cannot become a shliach lekabbalah to receive the get on behalf of the isha or the shtar shikra on behalf of the eved. And therefore the baal of the adon could be choser bo as long as the get has not reached the hands of the isha or the shtar shikra to the hands reach the hands of the eved. So according to Rabbi Meir, we have another halach in which we find the common link between Gittin Noshim and Shechrurei Avodim, and that's number 4. Now the Rabbanan, the Chachamim in that Mishnah on Daf Yud Aleph disagree and reject Rabbi Meir, because although they agree as far as get Isha is concerned, that Ein Chav in the other Shol B'Fanav, it's a Chov for an Isha to be misgarish, but as far as Eved is concerned, it's a Schus for the Eved to become a Ben Chorin, and Zoch the other Shol B'Fanav, and therefore the Shliach could now be Zoch immediately on behalf of the Eved because it's a Schus. And therefore, the Adon could not be Choser Bo from that split second that the Get Shukra was handed over to the Shliach. And all this has to do with the question of what's called Avdo Befkera Nichole, that an Eved hangs out with the Shfachos and he's allowed to have a relationship with them, and therefore he would rather stay an Eved. Or do we say no? It's not worth it for him to remain an Eved if he can come Ben Shchorin, and therefore it's a Schutz. So the Gemara asks the following question: Bishleim l'Rabbanon minyan olim utei had Rabbi Meir. The reason why we mention the number 3, and whenever the Mishnah or the Brisa mentions a number, it's coming lafuke, and it's coming lafuke Rabbi Meir, because in a shtar shichrur, according to Rabbi Meir, the Adon could be choser bo because it's a chov for the Eved to be mishtachel. And this number 3 of the Rabbanon is coming to exclude Rabbi Meir. And with regard to Ishtar Shichrur of an Eved, the Shliach could be Zocha B'Din, Zochel Alufanov, and the Adon can't be Choser. But Lefi Rabbi Meir, Minyan Lamute Mai, is there some other equation between Shtar Get and Shtar Shichrur which Rabbi Meir is rejecting? And the answer is yes. Lamute Hadesanya. Rabbi Meir wants to reject the Shita of the Tanakama in the following brisa: Edim shein yodim lachtom. You have witnesses that are not capable of signing their own name, and they come to sign a shtar. So the Shita here of the brisa is that Makarin lahem nir chalak, we engrave into an empty piece of paper the names that we do what you call a tracing, and we use a knife to do that, and then memala mesakroim dio, the Edom come along and they pour ink into that tracing, and that's considered a chasima according to the Tanakama. Rab Shimon Gamliel, b'medvar mamurim the Gittin Noshim, with regard to get Isha, we were makil because of Aguna and Takonas Aguna to protect her ability to receive the get. And we're going to allow the Edom to sign through this Kriya, even though they themselves have no clue how to sign their names. So that's the Takona of Mishum Igun. But with regard to Shechrurei Avodim Shtar Kol Shtaros, according to Reb Shimon Gamliel, with regard to all other stars, with the exception of a get Isha where there's no takana of Mishum Igun, im Yodim Likros Velachtom, Chosmim Vim Lav, Ein Chosmim, we cannot allow for this Kriya to have the Edim in Shar Shtaros, including Shechrurei Avodim, to fill in by pouring the ink into this cutout these cutout letters. And notice that it says in Yodim Likros, they have to be able to read the get. The Gemara is going to talk about that in just a minute. But basically, according to the Tanakama, in all shtaros, we do this kriya for the purpose of Edom on a niyar chalak. And the Tana wants to tell us, meaning Rabbi Meir, that we don't paskin like the Tanakama, but rather we accept the shita of Reb Shimon Gamliel, which means that as far as kriya, with an ayin, kriyas niyar, chalak, chalukim, dine get noshim, v'shechrurei avodim. and only Mishum Aguna, as Rav Shimon Gamliel argues, in the case of Gittin Noshin, they were Mater Kriya, but not in Shar Shtaros. So basically, Rabbi Meir is accepting the Shita of Shimon Gamliel against the Tanakama, and therefore this Kriya would not be an additional equation between Gittin Noshim and Shechrei Avodim. Now the Gemara asks, what did Rabbi Shimon Gamliel mean when he said that the Edom have to know how to read the shtar? Kriya Mandikar Shmei. Who mentioned anything, any din that an Edom, the Edom have to know how to read? The Tanakhama spoke about Edom who don't have to know, who don't know how to sign their name. So that's what Rabbi Shimon Gamliel should have mentioned. Why does he mention Kriya? And the Gemara answers, we have to add something to the Lashon HaBraisa. Edim shein yodim likros. Number one, korim lifneim. We have to read the shtar, the get, in their presence, because otherwise, if they can't read the shtar, what are they signing? And then ve'im chosm. But she'ein yodim lachtom v'korim lahem. If, on the other hand, there's no need to read the get, they can read the get, they just don't know how to sign their names, then according to Tanakama, we do this kriya, and we're going to do that for all shtaros. Rav Shimon Gamliel, on the other hand, rejects the Tanakama. He holds that in Shar Shtaros, the halacha is that they can only sign the get if they know how to read the get, the shtar, I should say, and how to sign the get. If they don't know how to read it, or they don't know how to sign their names, then there's no chasima. The Gemara says for Suleka is there not another, let's call it number 5, equation between get isha and shtar shikra v'ika. We have a sugya later on in Daf Yud Gimel, in which we equate Gittin Noshim and Shechrei Avodim Omer Tnu get zeli ishti shtar shikra zeli avdi lo yitno liachar misa. We have a principle of ain't get liachar misa, and the Gerushin will only be chal after he dies. Gerushin can't be chal after he dies because Paka Rishusa. And the same thing applies after the death of the Adon. Paka Rishusa, he doesn't have Bailus over the Eved after his death. It now is transferred over to the Yarshim. So therefore, after the death of the Baal, there's no possibility to megarish his wife, and after the death of the Adon, there's no possibility of a shichrur of the Eved. The ownership of the Eved is now transferred over to the Yarshim. So even according to the Rabbanan, who we discussed earlier, that hold that it's a schus for an Eved, lotzeis lecherus, and therefore the shliach should be able to be zocher to get on behalf of the Eved immediately before the death of the Adon. Nevertheless, as we indicated, the schus of the Eved is not a total schus. It means he blocks the ability through the kinyan al-atzmo for the Adon to be choser, but the Eved himself is not yet a ben chorin until the shtar reaches his hand. So the shichur is chal only when the get shichur reaches the hands of the Eved, and then the Adon is already dead. And the Yarshim have already, at that moment in time, inherited the Eved, and they weren't Meshachar the Eved. However, in the case of Shchiv Meirah, who declares on his deathbed, Tnu Monil Liploni Umes, Yitno Leachar Misa. Why? Chacham made a takana that Divrei Shchiv Meirah Kiksuvim Kimsurim Davi, meaning that the Shchiv Meirah who commands giving the Nechasim to so-and-so, it's as if the giving the Nesina, the Kinyan, was already clinched immediately before he died. But in any event, we see clearly from this price that get Isha and get Shechur Eved have the commonality that you cannot deliver them after the Misa. So we have another din in which we should equate Gittin Noshim and Shechrei Avodim. Why wasn't this mentioned in the list? And the Gemara answers, Ki Ketani. The brisa that mentions either 3 or 4 halachos, which are common to both Gittin Noshim and Shechrei Avodim, also the lesser b'shtaros. Those halachos are not noeg in other shtaros. It's only unique to get and shtar shikra. milsadisa v'shtaros, but halachos that apply to all stars lo ketani. And this halacha that if the Baal of the Adon dies before the Nesina and the delivering of the get, then the get is completely invalid, and you cannot give the get or the shtar shikra. That applies to all stars, even shtar matana. Or, for example, a shchib meirah who wants to give his karka matana to so and so, and he says to the shliach, "Give the shtar matana to so and so." He's not going to deliver it liachar misa, and the Gemara is going to explain why. But the karka is not niknes to the makabel until the shtar reaches his hand, and by the time it reaches his hand, he's already dead. So paka kocha. And the Gemara now quotes a source to prove that a shchimir wants to give his nechasim to Ploni with a matna shchimir and then he dies, they cannot deliver that shtar after his death. The shalach Rabbi Mishmei de Rabbi Abba, hevi yodim sheshalach Rabbi Lazal Agola Mishum Rabbeinu, shchimir asha Omar, kisvu utnu leploni umes. The shchimera declared that I want to use this shtar to give my karka to so-and-so, then we do not deliver the shtar after the death of the shchimera. And why? In Kosmanos, Shemalo Gomar Laknoso Ela B'shtar. No, it's if it was Divrei Shchimera and he said, give my karka to so-and-so, the kinyan is chal kimasurim dom. But if he specifically wrote a shtar, he wants the kinyan to be effectuated with shtar, then ein shtar liachar misa, he already died, and the shtar is therefore batul u'mavutal, and he doesn't own any matana that he can transfer it over, so it now is inherited by the yarship, and therefore he cannot be maknit liachar misa. So the Gemara asks for like Ika, I have another din that's common to both Shechrurei Noshim and Gittin Noshim Lishma. And that's derived, as we said before, from the Gzeirah Shava that equates Shechrurei Avadim to Gittin Noshim. So the Gemara says, I don't have a question B'Shleim LaRabba because Hainu Molochu Mevi. Right, the halacha according to Rabba of Molochu Mevi, which requires that the Shliach declare before Nechtam is predicated on the requirement of Lishma. And we said that there's no difference in this context between a get isha and a shtar shikra. El Rava, but Rava who says that b'fanei nechtam is not because of lishma, kasha. Why didn't the Tana enumerate this din of lishma, visu, and furthermore, bein l'Rav, bein l'Rava, iko mechubar. The Torah says in the parsha of Gerushin, v'kasav la sefer krisus v'nasam b'yad. So we have ksiva and Nesina. And the Gemara later on in Chaf Aleph derives that the get at the time of the Ksiva has to be royal in Nesina. And if it's b'mechumer l'karka, it's not royal in Nesina, and therefore the Ksiva is not valid. And Rav Soloveitchik used to always tell us that the Maisa Gerushin begins with the Ksiva Saget. And therefore, we have the same din in shtar shikhr, that if you write a shtar shikhr b'mechubar, then since we equate shtar shikhr get noshim, then the ksiva is invalid just because it's not royal in a sina, it's mechubar l'karka. And the Gemara answers, ki ktani psul d'rabbanan, but d'oraisa lo ktani. The entire list enumerated here by this brisa are psulim d'rabbanan, but psulim d'oraisa are not listed in this brisa. And the psul of lishma or the psul of mechubar are psulim d'oraisa. So according to this answer of the Gemara, the brisa only enumerates the halachos that are common to both Gittin Noshim and Shechrurei Avadim on a level of psul d'rabbanan. And again, these are halachos that are not noeg in shar shtaros, but only are halachos that are anchored in the Takonos Chachamim and not in the Dvar Torah. So the Gemara asks, we have an equation here in this brisa between get isha and shtar shikhr eved with regard to our chos. So we said that in our chos, someone who's not a bar ishus and he's not a B'Torah's Gittin Kedushin, and the Torah says the Kosovo Sefer Krisus V'Nosam B'Yad, and the Chacham interpret that anyone who's included in the Sinas again is kosher l'ksiva, but a guy who's not part of Nesinas again, therefore is not kosher l'ksiva, and Ktani, and yet this psul doraisa of a get that was written in Achos Shel Akum is listed here in the Brisa as one of the commonalities between the two. And the Gemara answers that the Mishnah that invalidates get shichur and get isha from Achos Shel Akum is B'Edei Mesira. In other words, there are Edom Ksherim who saw the Mesira Sabah. And now we're holding that Edei Mesira Karse, which means that you don't need Chasimas Edom on the get. Just 1 second. What about Lishma? Just 1 second. Oh, I'm sorry. What I left out here is Rashi. Rashi points out that we're talking about a case where a sofer, a Jewish sofer, wrote the get in the Achos Shel Akum. So we're lucky that they hired a little Yidela there in the Achos Shel Akum to write all the documents. So on a Doraisa level, this get is kosher. It's written Lishma. We don't require Chasimas Edom because we're holding now, like Rabbi Lazar, that Edom Mesira Kar. So the Chacham Pasal the get because of Mezuyach Mitocha. That means if there's a psul in the Guf HaGet, and that's based, and that's generated by the Chasim of the Goyim on the get, that's a psul d'Rabbana. So that even Rabbi Lazar doesn't require Edei Chasima, but if there were Edei Chasima, then it's called Mezuyach Mitocho. And in this case, that the Goyim were the ones who signed the get. Therefore, if the get is delivered in front of Edei Mesira, it's possible b'Rabbanan. So and the same halacha applies to Shtar Shtaros. That's why it's listed here. So the Gemara asks now, Seifa. In the Seifa of this Mishnah, it says, Rabbi Shimon Omer, Af Elu, even Gittin that are coming from the Achos Shel Akum Ksherim. And the reason for that is Omer Rab Zera Yored Rab Shimon L'Shitosas Rabbi Lazar, the Omer Edei Mesira Karse. And Rabbi Shimon accepted the Shita Rabbi Lazar, that the validity and the tokef of the shtar is generated by the Edei Mesira, and therefore the Chasimas Edom is not a psul, even though the Edom are goyim. So the Chasimas are considered lo ma'ila v'lo morid. It's if it's not in the get at all. Is michlal the Tanakh Savar lo? If Rabbi Shimon disagrees because he holds like Rabbi Lazar, then the implication is that the Tanakh rejected Rabbi Lazar. He didn't accept Edei Mesira Karse, but rather he accepted the Shita Rabbi Meir, Edei Chasima Karse. And now you have two witnesses signed on the get that are goyim. And that creates a psul doraisa because, as we said before, they're not the Torah's Gittin v'Kedushin. So the Brisa is certainly enumerating even psulim doraisa. Now we're back to the question, why the Tana didn't mention the psul of Lishma and Mechubar according to Rava. And the Gemara answers, Ikabeinayu Shemos Mufhakim. That's the Gemara here on Daf Yuda Amid Aleph, which Emir Hashem will have to fit in over the course of the next few days. Okay, then, so let me take this opportunity to wish you a Chag Sameach and a meaningful Kabbalah Torah, and thank you so much. Kol Tov.